Hi people, it's Archivist here coming at you with some World of Warcraft in patch 6.1. And in patch 6.1, among other things, were some new graphical settings for this game to make it look even better. Sure, the game's actually getting pretty old now, but Blizzard have done a great job of keeping it up to date visually, especially with the recent models of course. And I thought that what I would do in this video is go through many of the different graphical settings and talk about what they do, why you might want to use them, and keep in mind that a lot of these settings don't just apply to World of Warcraft, so even if you don't play WoW, you could still learn something from this video and get a sense of what the different settings do. So I'll start with resolution. So what you're seeing here is the game running in 1080p. And resolution essentially allows for an amount of detail to be shown on screen. Each monitor or screen will have a native resolution, its maximum resolution. For a long time this was 1080p, there was also 1440p which came with certain monitors like mine has as well, and also now you're getting 4K. 4K being really nice to look at, but the performance impacts for pretty much any game is going to be substantial. So you have to really find that sweet spot, and for me, on my monitor, that tends to be 1080p. It's not the highest resolution that my monitor can show, but when it comes to considering performance as well, I tend not to put it at 1440p. I kind of consider that overkill anyway. 1080p is perfectly sharp for me. So that's resolution. It's fairly simple, but it's a big point for debates at the moment, especially on consoles. One of the best things about PCs, of course, is the ability to change it depending on what you want. So you can't complain to a developer, oh, why are we playing this game at 900p? Because hey, you can change it if you want. That's great. Well, I can't remember the last time I played a game that didn't allow you to change resolutions. That would be mental. And I think at this point, although 720p is technically HD, no one's really satisfied with 720p anymore. I just played it at 720p a moment ago. I can't switch it now because of recording, but it just doesn't look good. It looks awful. I can't believe that that's considered HD still. I do wonder if they'll change that as a classification. Okay, so the next thing is anti-aliasing. Now to show you what aliasing is, I'm trying to highlight this blade of grass here, and you may notice that there are these slightly jagged edges around it, and this is most noticeable on small things like grass. Now I do have anti-aliasing enabled, but there are different forms and different effectiveness levels of anti-aliasing. So let me just bring the screen back up and show you them. So anti-aliasing. So you can have none. So this is really good for performance, but as a result you'll probably have a lot of jagged edges. Then you have fast approximate anti-aliasing. Now I tend to avoid this because this makes the entire screen blurry a little bit. It's not like reducing the resolution down all the way, but it does have a generally blurring effect that I am really not a fan of. Then you have something that I do like to use. This is conservative morphological anti-aliasing, I believe. I'm trying to remember that. I'm really not sure what it does, but I just like the way it does it. Let's just say that. I would recommend trying it. It's quite good. Then you have multi-sampling anti-aliasing, and what this does is it takes a higher resolution render of the image, so it would be higher than 1080p. It finds where the jagged edges is, and then it approximates how to reduce them on the lower resolution. I find this to be quite effective, but it does tend to show shimmering, and that's a drawback of anti-aliasing. You do sometimes get shimmering in objects when they're in motion, and that's something that temporal anti-aliasing can deal with, which I don't think is here. My favourite form of anti-aliasing, if it's available, is TXAA, but that's not here. And then you have super sampling anti-aliasing, which works in a similar way to multi-sampling anti-aliasing. Similar to resolutions, you're going to find that texture settings are going to be in pretty much every game out there, and textures just refer to essentially the resolution detail, but not on your entire screen, but particular objects. So just to look at my chest armor, for example, that's a texture, it's a high quality texture. If I was to reduce that, it would look blurrier, but it wouldn't be like blurring the entire screen, it would just be the texture detail. Now, there's some complexities when it comes to performance of texture, so how it impacts your frame rate. For a very long time, I thought that it was one of the things you could just turn it up to maximum and never ever worry about performance impact. But the thing is, for certain games, textures are so high that by doing that you cause stuttering, which is even worse than having a low frame rate. And this comes about when you don't have enough VRAM in your GPU. So if you notice that a game is stuttering, the first thing to do is to try and reduce the textures, because that is almost certainly what's causing it. If it's not, then it's probably actually the game engine and it's just something you're going to have to wait out, I'm afraid. But generally speaking, textures are the culprit for stuttering. An example of that being Evolve. I'm not going to, I mean, it's fine because Evolve looks fine on medium, but if on my GPU with 2 GB of VRAM, if I try and put it onto high textures, or even worse, ultra textures, I think it's very high in that game, it causes stuttering, which is just not great for gameplay. Okay, and now to move on to texture filtering, and what this does is allow for textures to retain their sharpness even when viewed at an angle. Now, I want you to pay attention to this road area as it goes further away. You'll notice it's actually pretty blurry over there. But if I move over to it, you'll notice, look, it's not actually blurry, it's just the angle. You even see, if you look closely enough, you'll see it blurring as it moves further away from me. So, if I use systems and turn it on to 16, you'll notice that the texture detail is retained even at a distance, and that is essentially what texture filtering does. Okay, so now what I'm going to talk about is ambient occlusion, which I have a bit of a hard time explaining, admittedly, but I'm going to try and just show what it means practically. So if you look at the crevices of this building, you'll notice that there is shading, there is shadows off in the corners, and that's just as a result of the lighting. But if I turn off ambient occlusion, currently I'm using horizon-based ambient occlusion, which is an NVIDIA exclusive technique, but if I disable it quickly, you'll notice that shading in the crevices and the intersections between objects is greatly reduced, and as a result you just have a far plainer and less dynamic looking building, and that affects the entire screen. If I turn it back on, we'll try and look at it. I'm trying to zoom out, it's difficult to get rid of. Try and pay attention to the building's front. There you go. So you'll notice they just popped back into view, and that is the effect that ambient occlusion has. It's something that's not too easy to explain. It's not like textures or resolution, but there is undeniably an effect there that you want. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is environment detail and ground clutter. Most games tend to put these two things together. A game I played that did that recently was Evolve, so this essentially refers to things like grass, maybe some trees, rocks, you know, that kind of thing, environment detail. Now, it's pretty difficult to see the difference in environment detail, but you'll immediately know the difference if I reduce ground clutter. So let's turn that to low, and you'll see, look at that, just you can see the texture underneath, but it just looks far plainer and boring. It's just not nearly as good. And in some games, Evolve being probably the best example, it actually looks significantly worse without this. Okay, so those are all the settings I'm going to cover in this video. There are definitely more, but I just wanted to go through the ones that apply not just to World of Warcraft, and also the ones that have been updated in patch 6.1 as well. So, as always people, thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.